Bien, pues damos paso. Los ponentes tienen 15 minutos cada uno para su ponencia y comenzamos con Iain.
Thank you, Sergio. Thank you to the foundation. Sorry, start that again. Is that better? Thank you, Sergio. Thank you very much to the foundation. Absolute privilege to be here today in Seville. I was slightly nervous coming to speak today because I realise that I'm going to speak in English, which is my native language, and I do tend to speed up quite quickly. And I was at an event a couple of weeks ago in Brussels, and other people were there when somebody sped up quite fast in their native tongue and caused a bit of tension or a bit of nervousness in the interpreters. So I'll try my best to slow down if I can, although I have got 15 minutes. And I feel like I'm probably running over already. Anyway, another thing I'm slightly nervous about as well, I've probably got some numbers which are about money, and I'll try and convert them into euros because, apologies, my mind's still in pound sterling. But when I say nervousness, I'm actually probably more nervous about an event I'm actually going to be speaking at on Friday back in Scotland, if I actually thought about it. So I might mention that at the end, actually, because I think that's something to think about, all of us in this room. So who are we? Hopefully this has worked. I haven't touched it yet. Press a button. No. Oh, yes. So that's Stirling Castle. I thought it's not the usual one that people think about when they think of Scotland, but we think Stirling is just as impressive as Edinburgh in true circular economy style. This was built to last. This was built over 1,000 years ago. It's had very many purposes over that time, but it still stands out as what we would say is something that is made to last and continues to endure, which is very much what we think the circular economy is about as well. And I was very delighted to get in time last night to look around Seville and see some fantastic buildings as well that were obviously clearly built here to last as well. So I guess we do have something in common, that the idea of the circular economy is in with our history. Who we are as an organisation, Zero Waste Scotland is a separate organisation from government, but it was set up by the Scottish Government in 2010 to really lead its strategies around, first of all, recycling, but more recently resource efficiency and businesses across Scotland, looking at energy and water as well as materials, and more recently, very recently, taking a lead on the ambitions around the circular economy. So we really facilitate investment opportunities both in the public sector and the private sector, and in the third economy, the social economy. We've invested in anaerobic digestion infrastructure in Scotland, food waste collections. It is now obligatory in Scotland to have a separate food waste collection, both at household level and in businesses across Scotland. So we've been rolling that out over the past few years. We've established a reuse network across Scotland to ensure that there is facilities for people to exchange second-hand goods, and a whole host of other things that we've been involved in, probably too many to mention. I lead a team of just over 100 staff based in Stirling, right in the centre of Scotland, and our annual budget is around about 30 million euros, if that puts that into context, although that's going to increase slightly over the next couple of years. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. What we've done since is really the regulations, just to touch upon the regs. Traditional waste regulations, we've gone through the last couple of years of introducing new regulations, as I've said, to ensure that materials are separated for collection, both food waste and all the other key materials, plastics, glass, etc. They were introduced in Parliament in 2012 and came into force in 2014. So all businesses and now households are separating key materials out. There's also landfill restrictions due to come in place in terms of the materials that can be sent to landfill in 2020. There's some targets, 70% recycling target by 2025 and a 5% landfill maximum by 2025 as well. So these are obviously slightly ahead of those that are coming through the EU package, but certainly we're all in the same direction of travel, that we need to step away from what we've been doing in the past. The way these regulations got through Parliament was really was really on the idea that by recycling more, clearly there's an environmental opportunity and benefit, not just to the people of Scotland, but to the rest of the world in terms of us taking our part. But we had the real evidence that by separating these materials out, we would see more economic benefit. We would cut costs for businesses, and there would be jobs in the separation and the reprocessing of those materials, and those have come to pass. We now look at food waste collections. We now have private businesses employing upwards of 50, 60 people collecting a waste that basically went straight to landfill only a matter of 4 or 5 years ago. Real economic opportunity, and they're seeing investment from the private sector in those types of initiatives. What we're really trying to do with that is create what we call a resource grid. So we've got one in Scotland for energy, and we've got one obviously for water. What we see is the variable collection infrastructure that we've had in the past, with different municipalities collecting different materials at different times and in different shapes and sizes and perhaps quality. We need to really harness that and develop basically one system that will bring that consistency and really open up the opportunities for further economic opportunities in terms of jobs. So instead of us just trying to collect things and keep it out of landfill and sending them off in various different colours of shapes or boxes or containers, we really need to start thinking about how we can marshal those resources for our own economy. Why is that important to us? This is where the circular economy comes in, because although we're recycling very well in Scotland and the plans that are in place will increase the level of recycling, still over 75% of what we collect gets exported out of Scotland, basically in another container. Now, whilst that's good for the environment, it's not very good for our economy. It's probably good for other people's economies, but forgive me if I sound selfish, that we really see the opportunities to do something with those materials here in Scotland. We've all seen those types of diagrams before from the likes of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. This is from an organisation based in the UK called Green Alliance, which basically demonstrates the value of the materials if we look beyond recycling in terms of parts for repair and also reuse. Those are really, really exciting numbers for Scotland. That really shows the wealth of ambition and in terms of the economy we could really make in our small country by just harnessing the resources, which we're very good at collecting separately and putting in a different container, but we're not so smart at making the most of in our countries. And that's what really the circular economy means to Scotland. So what's Scotland done about it? So we launched a strategy. It has been trailed already just a couple of weeks ago. Scottish Government, our first Cabinet Secretary for Environment, launched the strategy after about a year's consultation. You're probably wondering why there's a man with a kilt there. There's no reason. I just thought I'd show a man with a kilt. No, there is actually, because the kilt's a good example of the circular economy for those of you who have Scottish ancestors. If you're young in your mid-20s or your early 20s, you usually go and buy a kilt. And the reason you buy a kilt, obviously, you're probably going to a wedding or it's your own wedding. And the whole idea is that kilt is built to last you your lifetime. There's certain secrets that can be done with the kilt to expand it slightly if your waistline increases over time, which the designer builds into that. But basically, you can wear that for your lifetime. But if you don't want to buy a kilt, you actually rent one. So there's a huge thing going to parties and New Year celebrations and ceilidhs, etc., that people actually rent the kilt. So it's a great example of the circular economy, because no one in Scotland owns 2 kilts. That's a fact. So anyway, take a quick slug of water. The strategy was launched just a few weeks ago, so I really encourage you all to go and have a look at it. It's been trailed. I won't get into too much of the detail, but it sets out the ambition for Scotland, and it's not a waste strategy. It certainly supersedes the previous waste strategy in 2010, but it goes beyond thinking about our resources as waste and clearly sets out an agenda around design and innovation and trying to build in that whole circular aspect that previous speakers have been perhaps more eloquently putting forward. It's also backed up with some investment, so going back to money, we've secured a further 35 to 40 million euros of structural funds to kickstart this revolution in Scotland, to accelerate our ambitions for a circular economy, and that's just over the next 3 years, and we're very hopeful there'll be more coming. So what have we been doing? We've obviously been doing a lot of the evidence gathering, why it got to this point that the Scottish Government felt comfortable to launch a strategy. We looked at, as you would imagine, the key industries in Scotland. There's a glass of whiskey, just emphasise that. So we looked at the key industries in Scotland to really see where the opportunities were. And when we started to look at things like the whiskey industry, the beer industry, and the fishing industry, the fish farming industry, we identified something in the region of, look at my numbers now, 700 million euros of potential benefit just on those three industries alone if we start to shift towards a circular economy in terms of using the byproducts in a different way, looking at the systems that they're involved in terms of their production. If you look at manufacturing as well, there's a 900 million euro opportunity when you start to think about the remanufacturing opportunities in Scotland. Even in oil and gas, the decommissioning of the North Sea is upon us, and it will be going forward for the next 30 to 40 years in terms of infrastructure coming back on. The oil and gas industry is very good at recycling all of that equipment when it comes on in terms of metals. But we started to look at the reusing opportunities and the remanufacturing, repurposing of that equipment coming on. And there's a 15-fold benefit in terms of shifting towards a circular economy for that interest. Now, you're talking billions of pounds opportunity over the next 30 years. So really it's huge. And these numbers really dwarf what we would get if we just boxed up our materials, put them in a container and sold them into the world economy as materials that we'd collected for recycling. These numbers really do dwarf, and that's why when the Scottish Government launched its, not just this strategy recently, the manufacturing strategy for Scotland, which was launched by our First Minister just a couple of weeks ago, that the circular economy was there at the heart of that as a real new opportunity for re-energising our manufacturing base in Scotland like no other. So we've been working, what have we been doing since? I mean, we've been cutting our teeth working with individual companies, so bringing it down to the kind of micro level. We've run a sort of pilot service for the last couple of years where we've introduced the idea of a circular economy to small businesses in Scotland to try and get them to think about how they could repurpose their business proposition. They could certainly think about upskilling the staff around remanufacturing and repair, and they could start to look for new markets both in Scotland and abroad, and we've been doing that. And as part of the European Structural Fund proposal that we've got in terms of funding, we'll be rolling that service out across Scotland to all SMEs to try and get them engaged, and we've already identified in those key sectors key companies that we believe could really be some of the leading companies, not just in Scotland but certainly the UK, if not in Europe, an SME level, to really make the circular economy happen. And another key thing about that is that's working hand in hand with our enterprise agencies. So the enterprise agency, with every respect to them, haven't really been interested in this agenda, waste, recycling, skip hire. Why would they? It doesn't see much of a growth sector for them, but the circular economy is big, and we're hoping that they'll bring the weight that they brought behind the renewable industry in Scotland to bear on the idea of the circular economy. I would encourage you all to look at our website. We've got a number of other examples. I won't spend too much time because I know time is tight. But if you go onto the Zero Waste Scotland website, there's a number of examples of companies we've worked with over the last year and a bit. Just thought, I put that down because I was at an event just the other week there where a colleague in Europe, one of the European commissioners, spoke about procurement being the sleeping beauty. So I thought I'd put a picture up of the Sleeping Beauty, and I think that's right. I think it's been mentioned already, the real opportunity to increase the circular economy, particularly in Scotland, and I'm sure across other parts of Europe, is through procurement, really creating the new market. And it's not just, with every respect, eco products. I think we're probably like everybody else, we're very good at that. This is about that whole idea of how we can actually change procurement, so we're hiring things, we're leasing things. We're not going out and buying the things, we're actually trying to create a market for those both at home and abroad. I also think one of the sleeping beauties is producer responsibility. I know that's been talked about as well. That's something we have, it's a bit of a dynamic being a sort of region within a main member state in terms of producer responsibility, but part of the strategy that we've just launched will be to look at a new framework for producer responsibility in Scotland with some key products already in sight of the government, including mattresses, paint, and some hazardous materials as well. Skills, if I may, I think the other sleeping beauty is how do we develop skills and innovation in universities. And that's where the challenge comes in for me, because I'm not used to speaking to students in universities. I usually stop at this point and say, is there anybody here from universities? Bit of a delay, I don't know if people want to put, yeah. There's a few, not many, and that's classic of with every respect, a sort of waste, resources, recycling conference. You don't get many students, and I think that needs to change. I know it needs to change, and I think we all do that. That's where the real energy will come from with universities and spin-off companies and thinking about it and working with businesses. And a real success for us, at the beginning of last year, the Scottish Government launched the Institute, the Scottish Institute for Remanufacturing in Glasgow, Strathclyde University. It's only the 4th institute of its type in the world, the first in Europe, and that was to really drive a partnership between universities and business. Our bit was really easy. We just put some money in, but even more interesting for us was the people who fund universities, the Scottish Funding Council. They put in even more money than us because they actually saw this as a real opportunity that could go places, and that has taken off with great success in that last year. We just announced about £240,000, about 300,000 euros for the first sort of like dozen projects. But what's really critical about that, there's about 20 to 30 businesses, manufacturing businesses involved in that with the University of Strathclyde. And that's what I think the circular economy brings to the table, but it needs more of it. And we really hope that we'll see as much of that being wakened as a sleeping beauty going forward. So just going back to that challenge, we can't forget this, that this is great. I've given you great numbers, great economic impact, but really this is all about carbon, climate change. 11 million tonnes of CO2, that's what the Scottish waste, that's the impact of the waste of Scotland annually. It's quite staggering, isn't it? And this isn't what it costs in terms of, or cost the environment in terms of methane. This is the impact of all of the materials that we've sent away for waste and also recycled, because there's an impact in recycling as well. So we developed a carbon metric a couple of years ago, a special way of measuring the impact of waste and recycling and reuse for that matter, to really demonstrate what the real impact is. And this is what it shows us. The good news is though that it's come down to 11 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent over the last couple of years, so it's come down by 17%, which is great. But we've got a long way to go. But what it really does, using the carbon metric, what it really shows is that reuse, repair, in fact waste prevention really makes the difference. It really starts to eat into those numbers. So this is not about trying to, recycle more. This is about ensuring that when we start to move towards the circular economy, we're measuring it and we're showing the real advantages of it. So although we're announcing today our carbon impact of our waste is coming down, we still have a long way to go. And I think that's just where I'd like to leave it. I think it is about carbon. We've kept that sometimes hidden away when we've talked about the jobs and the environmental impact, the economic impact, but there is one there. And I'm going to an event on Friday where there's going to be lots of people who are coming to Scotland thinking about investment, talking to people who want to invest in our sort of like charge to deal with climate change in terms of renewables and all the other interesting opportunities. I've got to pitch the circular economy to them. The people who organised the event weren't sure that was really something. Oh yeah, carbon, yeah, there's a bit, recycling really helps, but I'm not sure that's really that important. I didn't quite say that. But we've convinced them because of the numbers, and we did a report last year that showed them if we shift towards the circular economy, we could reduce our carbon impacts by about 20%, the equivalent of 20%. So that's just a conservative shift to the circular economy. So I'm going there on Friday, and I'm going to go and pitch the circular economy to them. Most of the people in that room won't have heard of the circular economy. And they'll be thinking about how do they invest in something sexy like renewables, and I'm going to try and convince them. So I think that's a challenge, and I think that's something that we all have to recognise, that this has got to go out of this room, and we have to go and invest time with those other people and collaborate with them. But it's a challenge. But with the numbers and the passion, I believe we can do it, because it's crazy not to do it now. Whether you want jobs, whether you want a better planet, whether you want more social cohesion or inclusion in your community, and I'm sure politicians want that all. I want it all. I think everybody in the street wants that all. The circular economy is the very big, bold step to get there. Thank you.